The wind came hard across the Nebraska plains that morning, carrying dust and the smell of drought. Caleb Ward stood in the doorway of his barn, coffee going cold in his hand, watching the sun break over land that had belonged to his family for 3 generations. The paint on the barn was peeling. The fence lines sagged in places he hadn't gotten around to fixing. His father would have been ashamed. His father was dead, though. Had been for 2 years. Cancer took him slow, piece by piece, until there wasn't anything left but medical bills and a mortgage the farm couldn't support anymore. Caleb drained the last of his coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. He needed to get moving. The north pasture needed checking, and the irrigation system was making that grinding noise again, the one that meant another expensive repair he couldn't afford. He was halfway to his truck when he saw the dust trail on the access road. Nobody came out here. The nearest neighbor was 4 miles east, and they barely spoke. Caleb squinted against the morning glare, trying to make out the vehicle. Not a truck. Something low and sleek, completely wrong for these roads. A black Mercedes. It pulled up to his house with the kind of confidence that didn't belong here, tires crunching on gravel. The engine cut. The door opened. The woman who stepped out looked like she'd taken a wrong turn somewhere around Denver and just kept driving. Tailored black suit, heels that would sink straight into the dirt, dark hair pulled back so tight it probably hurt. She surveyed his property with the kind of assessment that made Caleb's jaw tighten. "Caleb Ward?" Her voice carried across the yard, crisp and certain. "Who's asking?" She crossed the distance between them in measured steps, somehow managing not to stumble despite the uneven ground. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 30, with sharp features and eyes that looked like they'd already calculated 6 different outcomes to this conversation. "Lena Voss." She extended her hand. He didn't take it. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" "It means I own Voss Ag, which means I control about 40% of the agricultural distribution in this region." She lowered her hand, unbothered. "Which means the co-op you sell your wheat to. I decide what they pay for it." Caleb's grip tightened on his coffee mug. "You drove 200 miles to threaten me about wheat prices?" "I drove 200 miles to offer you a deal." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." "Don't need to. Whatever you're selling, I can't afford it. And whatever you're buying, I'm not parting with it." He turned back toward the barn. "I need a husband." That stopped him. He looked back at her, waiting for the punchline. Her expression hadn't changed. "I have 24 hours to present a marriage certificate to my board of directors, or I lose controlling interest in my company. I've run the numbers. You're my best option." Caleb stared at her for a long moment, then let out a short laugh. "You're out of your mind." "Probably." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, offering it to him. "But I'm also serious. There's $100,000 in it for you. Cash, plus legal protection for your property. I can make sure the bank doesn't touch this place." He didn't take the folder. "Lady, I don't know what kind of operation you think I'm running here, but your property taxes are 6 months overdue. You owe First National $83,000 on your mortgage, and they've already started foreclosure proceedings. You've got maybe 60 days before you lose everything." She paused. "I did my research." The coffee mug cracked in his hand. He looked down at the pieces, at the coffee soaking into the dirt, then back up at her. "Get off my property. I'm offering you a way out. You're offering me fraud." "I'm offering you survival." She set the folder on the hood of his truck. "The money's real. The marriage would be real, legally. We'd just be clear about why we're doing it. And when your board figures out you married some random farmer you met yesterday, they won't. That's the point." Lena crossed her arms. "Look, I don't like this any more than you do, but my grandfather built Voss Ag from nothing, and I'm not letting his bastard nephew take it apart because I didn't meet some archaic requirement in a will I didn't write." Sounds like a you problem. It's about to be a you problem, too. Victor Hale, that's the nephew. His first move when he takes over will be consolidating suppliers. He'll cut out the small operations, force everyone to sell to his facilities at whatever price he sets. People like you? You'll be gone within a year. Caleb picked up the folder, looked at it, then tossed it back at her. "I've survived worse than market manipulation." "Have you survived losing your home?" The words hit harder than they should have. He thought about his father's workshop, still full of tools he couldn't bring himself to pack up. His mother's garden, overgrown now, but still there. The bedroom where he'd grown up, where his parents had grown up before him. "This is insane," he said quietly. "Yes. You could find anyone, someone in the city, someone who actually fits into your world. I don't have time to find anyone else, and everyone in my world wants something from me. You're just honest about it." She picked up the folder from where it had fallen, dusted it off. "Look, I get it. This is bizarre. But I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm asking you to sign a piece of paper, show up to a few meetings, and let me handle the rest." "For how long?" 6 months. "Maybe a year. Long enough to satisfy the board and secure my position. After that, quiet dissolution. No drama. And if someone finds out, they won't. I'm very good at controlling narratives." She held out the folder again. "This is everything. The contract, the terms, the timeline. Read it, think about it, but I need an answer by tonight." This time he took it. Not because he was considering it, he wasn't, not really, but because he wanted her gone, and people like her didn't leave until they got what they came for. "I'll call you," he muttered. "Good." She started back toward her car, then paused. "For what it's worth, Mr. Ward, I chose you because you're the only person I researched who didn't immediately strike me as someone who'd try to exploit this situation. That probably doesn't mean much to you, but it means something to me." She drove away in a cloud of dust, leaving Caleb standing in his driveway with a folder full of papers that felt like they weighed 100 pounds. He didn't open the folder until after dark. The day had been brutal. Fixing the irrigation line took 4 hours and 2 trips into town for parts he couldn't afford. By the time he got back, his hands were torn up and his patience was shot. He made himself dinner, burned it, ate it anyway, then finally sat down at the kitchen table with the folder. The contract was thick. Legal language he barely understood, clauses within clauses. But the key points were clear enough. Marriage to be contracted for a period of no less than 6 months, no more than 18 months, depending on corporate requirements. Party A, Lena Voss, agrees to provide Party B, Caleb Ward, with a payment of $100,000 upon signing, plus coverage of all outstanding debts related to the property at address listed. Party B agrees to appear jointly with Party A at required corporate and social functions, maintaining the public appearance of a legitimate marriage. All assets remained separate. No claim to inheritance or company holdings. There were pages of contingencies, confidentiality clauses, exit strategies. It was airtight, clinical, the kind of document that reduced something that should matter into a business transaction. Caleb pushed it away and went to the window. Outside, the farm stretched into darkness. He could just make out the shape of the barn, the fence line, the equipment shed that needed a new roof. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Have you decided?" LV. He stared at the message for a long time, then he typed back, "This is crazy." The response came immediately. "Yes, but is it a yes or a no?" Caleb looked around the kitchen. At the water stain on the ceiling from the leak he couldn't afford to fix properly. At the bills stacked on the counter. At the foreclosure notice he'd stopped reading because he already knew what it said. He thought about his father, who'd worked this land for 40 years and died still owing on it. About his mother, who'd held on for 6 months after his father passed before the grief took her too. They'd built something here. Something that mattered. And he was about to lose it because he couldn't keep up with payments to people who'd never set foot on this soil. His fingers moved before he could talk himself out of it. Where do I sign? The courthouse was in North Platte, a squat brick building that smelled like floor wax and old paper. Lena was already there when Caleb arrived, looking somehow even more severe in daylight. She'd brought a lawyer, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who didn't make eye contact. "Mr. Ward," Lena offered her hand again. This time he shook it. "Ms. Voss." "Lena, if we're doing this, we should probably use first names." "Right, Caleb it." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If we could proceed? I have the license here, already filled out. You'll both need to sign, and then we'll need the officiant." It happened fast. Too fast. 1 minute Caleb was standing in the hallway, and the next he was in front of a tired-looking clerk who was reading from a card about commitment and partnership, words that felt like they belonged to someone else's life. "Do you, Caleb James Ward, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" He looked at Lena. She met his gaze steadily, no emotion visible. This was a transaction to her, A strategic move. He needed to remember that. I do. And do you, Lena Marie Voss, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Nebraska, I now pronounce you husband and wife. The clerk didn't even look up from the paperwork. Congratulations. No kiss, no celebration, just signatures on a line, a stamp, and a certificate that made them legally bound to each other. They walked out into the parking lot together. Lena's lawyer had already disappeared. I've arranged for the funds to be transferred to your account by end of business today, Lena said, pulling out her phone. The mortgage payment will be handled directly. You should receive confirmation within 48 hours. Okay, I'll need you in Omaha next week. Board meeting. You'll need to be there. Look supportive. My assistant will send you the details. I don't own a suit. She glanced up from her phone, taking in his jeans and work jacket. I'll have one sent to you. Size? He told her. She made a note. Anything else? She asked. Yeah. What happens if this doesn't work, if your board sees through it? Then we both lose. She slipped her phone into her bag. But that's not going to happen. I don't lose. She said it with such certainty that he almost believed her. I'll see you next week, Caleb. She got into her Mercedes and drove away, leaving him standing in the parking lot with a marriage certificate and a strange, hollow feeling in his chest. He looked down at the paper in his hand. Caleb James Ward and Lena Marie Voss, married this day. What the hell did I just do? He muttered to no one. His phone buzzed. Bank notification. Deposit. $100,000. He stared at the number for a long moment, then got in his truck and drove home. The suit arrived 3 days later, delivered by courier. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, probably cost more than his truck. There was a shirt too, crisp white, and a tie in dark blue. Lena had included a note. Board meeting is Thursday, 2 p.m. Car will pick you up at noon. Wear this. Try to look like you don't hate me. L. He tried on the suit that night, standing in front of the bathroom mirror that had been his father's. The fit was perfect. He looked like someone else. Someone who belonged in glass buildings and leather chairs, not barns and hayfields. Someone who might actually be married to Lena Voss. Thursday came too fast. The car that picked him up was another Mercedes, driven by a silent man in a black suit. The drive to Omaha took 2 hours. Caleb spent most of it looking out the window, watching the landscape change from rural to suburban to urban, feeling increasingly out of place. The Vosag building was downtown, all steel and glass, the kind of structure that seemed designed to intimidate. The lobby alone was bigger than his entire house. Lena met him on the 15th floor, emerging from an office with 2 assistants trailing behind her. She looked different here, more commanding, more certain. This was her territory. Good, you're on time. She dismissed the assistants with a gesture, then turned to him. How are you doing? Terrified. The corner of her mouth twitched. Don't be. You're just here to stand next to me and occasionally nod. Think you can handle that? Probably. The important thing is Victor. He's going to try to rattle you, ask questions, poke holes. Don't engage. Let me handle him. This Victor guy sounds like a real piece of work. He's worse than you're imagining. She straightened his tie, a gesture so casual it startled him. Just remember, we're married. We're united. He can't touch that. The boardroom was exactly what he expected. Long table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. About a dozen people were already seated, and they all turned to look when Caleb and Lena entered. Gentlemen, ladies, Lena's voice shifted into something more formal. I'd like you to meet my husband, Caleb Ward. Caleb, this is the Vosag Board of Directors. The reactions varied. Some nodded politely. Others looked skeptical. One man, mid-50s, expensive suit, smile that didn't reach his eyes, stood up. Victor Hale. He extended his hand to Caleb. Lena's cousin. Well, second cousin. Family gets complicated. Caleb shook his hand. Victor's grip was just slightly too firm. A dominance play. Congratulations on the marriage, Victor continued, his tone carefully neutral. Quite sudden, wasn't it? I don't believe any of us even knew Lena was seeing anyone. We kept it private, Lena said smoothly, taking her seat at the head of the table. Caleb sat beside her. Shall we begin? The meeting was brutal. 3 hours of financial reports, strategic planning, market analysis. Caleb understood maybe a quarter of it, but he watched and he learned. Victor was smart. Everything he said sounded reasonable, supportive even, but there was poison underneath. Little comments about Lena's judgment, questions about her long-term vision, suggestions that maybe she was stretched too thin, and he kept circling back to the marriage. "I'm just curious, Caleb," Victor said about an hour in, his tone friendly. "What is it you do? I assume you're not in agriculture." "I farm, wheat mostly, western Nebraska." "Small operation?" "Family farm." "How lovely. And how did you and Lena meet?" Caleb felt Lena's hand on his knee under the table. A warning. "Through business," he said carefully. "Vosag works with the co-op I sell to." "Really? That's interesting, because I've reviewed our supplier lists and I don't see a Ward on any of them." "We use an intermediary," Lena interjected. "Victor, if you have concerns about my personal life, perhaps we could discuss them outside of board time?" "I'm just trying to understand the timeline. You were single 3 weeks ago. Now you're married. It's quite a transformation." "People fall in love, Victor. It happens." "Of course. I'm very happy for you both." He smiled that empty smile again. "I just hope this doesn't become a distraction from your responsibilities here." The meeting finally ended. Caleb's head was pounding. Lena walked him to the elevator, her expression unreadable. "You did well," she said quietly. "He knows. He suspects. That's different." "Lena, I'll handle it." The elevator arrived. "Car will take you home. I'll call you tomorrow." He stepped into the elevator, turned back to look at her. She was already walking away, phone to her ear, back in her element. The doors closed. Sat. Victor made his move faster than expected. Caleb was fixing the fence line when his phone rang 2 days later. Unknown number, but he answered anyway. "Mr. Ward, this is Jennifer Price with the Omaha Herald. I'm working on a story about Lena Voss and her recent marriage. Do you have a few minutes to comment?" His stomach dropped. "No comment." "I understand this is sensitive, but we've received some information suggesting that your marriage may not be—" He hung up. The phone rang again immediately. Different number. He didn't answer. By evening, there were 6 more calls. 2 more reporters, 3 blocked numbers, and 1 from Lena. "Don't talk to anyone," she said when he picked up. "Victor's feeding them a story." "Let me handle it." "What kind of story?" "The kind that makes us both look like frauds." She sounded tired. "I'm putting out fires here. Just stay quiet, stay on the farm. I'll fix this." "Lena, I have to go. Trust me, Caleb." The line went dead. He tried to trust her. He did. But the calls kept coming, and then the reporters started showing up in person. First 1, then 2, camping out at the end of his driveway with cameras. He stopped going outside except when absolutely necessary. 3 days later, Lena arrived unannounced, driving a different car, a blue SUV instead of the Mercedes. She looked exhausted, her usual armor showing cracks. "We have a problem," she said, pushing past him into the house. "No kidding." She dropped a folder on his table. Inside were printed articles, all from the last 48 hours. Voseg, heiress's convenient marriage raises questions. Sources say Voss' wedding was contractual, not romantic. Is Lena Voss's marriage a corporate fraud? "Victor has investigators," Lena said. "They're digging into everything. Our timeline, our history, looking for proof we didn't know each other before the wedding." "Did they find any?" "Not yet. We were careful. But he's not going to stop." She sat down, ran her hands through her hair. "The board is scheduling an emergency hearing. They want to review the validity of our marriage before confirming my position." "Can they do that?" "The company bylaws give them authority to investigate potential fraud that could impact corporate governance. So yes, they can." She looked up at him. "We need to make this look real, Caleb. Not just legal. Real." "How?" "You need to move in with me." He stared at her. "What?" "We can't be living in separate states. It looks exactly like what it is. An arrangement. I have a house in Omaha. You need to be there. I can't just leave the farm. Hire someone to manage it. I'll pay for it." "Lena, I can't." "Yes, you can. Because if we don't do this, we both lose everything. My company, your farm, all of it." She stood up, pacing. I know this isn't what you signed up for. It's not what I wanted either. But Victor is going to tear us apart if we give him any opening. We need to be bulletproof. Caleb looked around his kitchen, at the life he'd been trying so hard to hold on to. How long? He asked quietly. Until the hearing, maybe longer. I don't know. He thought about it. About leaving this place, even temporarily. About living in some city house with a woman he barely knew, pretending to be something he wasn't. But he also thought about losing it all. The farm, the legacy, everything his parents had built. Okay, he said finally. But I need to come back on weekends, check on things. Deal! She extended her hand. He shook it. And just like that, the arrangement became something more complicated. Something that required them to actually be in each other's lives, not just on paper. Pack a bag, Lena said. We leave in the morning. She left, and Caleb stood alone in his kitchen, wondering what the hell he'd gotten himself into, and if there was any way out that didn't end in disaster. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying dust across the empty fields. The storm was just beginning. Lena's house wasn't what Caleb expected. He'd imagined something cold and modern, all glass and steel like her office building. Instead, it was an older colonial in a tree-lined neighborhood, the kind of place that suggested roots, history, the kind of place that made their sudden marriage look even more suspicious. She pulled into the garage, killed the engine, and sat there for a moment without moving. This was my grandfather's house, she said finally. He left it to me when he died. I probably should have sold it, gotten something more practical, but I couldn't. Caleb looked at the boxes stacked along the garage walls. The garden tools hung neatly on pegboards. Signs of a life lived here, not just a house owned. I get it, he said. She glanced at him, something shifting in her expression. Yeah, I think you do. Inside, the house was tidier than his place, but not by much. Mail stacked on the kitchen counter, a coffee mug left in the sink, a blanket draped over the back of the couch. Evidence of someone who worked too much to care about perfect presentation. Guest room's upstairs, second door on the left, Lena said, setting her bag down. Bathroom's across the hall. I'm usually gone by 7, back around 8 if I'm lucky. There's food in the fridge. Help yourself to whatever. Lena. She turned, already halfway to the stairs. We should probably talk about how this is going to work, he said. What do you mean? I mean the rules, the boundaries. If we're living together, even temporarily, we need to be clear about what this is and isn't. She came back down, leaned against the doorframe. Okay, what are you thinking? Separate rooms, obviously. No pretending when it's just us. We're civil, professional, but we're not trying to be something we're not behind closed doors. Agreed. And I need to know what you expect when we're in public. What I'm supposed to say, how I'm supposed to act. I'm not good at lying. You don't have to lie. We are married. That's the truth. She crossed her arms. The rest is just letting people make their own assumptions. You don't volunteer information, don't explain ourselves. We're private people. That's not suspicious. It's just how some couples are. And when Victor asks questions, refer him to me. Always. She met his eyes. I know this is uncomfortable. I know you didn't sign up for this level of involvement, but I need you to trust me. I've been dealing with people like Victor my whole life. I know how they think, how they operate. If we stick together, if we don't give him any cracks to exploit, he can't win. Caleb nodded slowly. All right. But Lena, if this goes sideways, if it looks like we're both going down, I need you to cut me loose, save yourself. The farm isn't worth destroying your whole life over. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. No, she agreed. But I'm very good at making sure things go the way I want them to. She went upstairs, leaving him alone in the kitchen of a dead man's house, married to a woman he'd known for less than 2 weeks, wondering how the hell any of this was supposed to end well. He carried his bag upstairs. The guest room was simple but comfortable. Double bed, dresser, window overlooking the backyard. He unpacked his 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, and tried not to think about how little of his life he'd brought with him. His phone buzzed. Text from Marcus, the neighbor 4 miles east who'd agreed to check on his place. Cows are good. Fixed that loose board on the gate. You doing okay out there? Caleb stared at the message. Marcus didn't know about the marriage, about any of this. Nobody back home did. What was he supposed to say? Yeah, just dealing with some business. Thanks for watching the place. No problem. Let me know if you need anything. He set the phone down and lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. From down the hall, he could hear water running, Lena in the shower. The intimacy of the sound made him uncomfortable. This was too close, too real. They were supposed to be keeping this clinical, businesslike. Living together changed that equation whether they wanted it to or not. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, it was dark outside and someone was knocking on his door. Caleb? Lena's voice, quieter than usual. You awake? He sat up, disoriented. Yeah, what time is it? Almost 9. I ordered food, Ty. Figured you probably didn't eat. He hadn't. His stomach reminded him of that fact loudly. Be right down. She'd set everything out on the kitchen table. Containers of pad thai, green curry, spring rolls. 2 plates, 2 forks. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair down for the first time since he'd met her. She looked younger like this, less armored. I didn't know what you'd like, she said, sitting down. So I got a variety. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was good, better than anything he usually managed for himself. Victor called me 6 times today, Lena said finally. Left 4 voicemails. He's panicking. That's good, right? It would be, except panicking makes him dangerous. He's not going to back down. He's going to escalate. She pushed rice around her plate. I got word from one of my contacts on the board. He's planning to call for a vote of no confidence next month. If he succeeds, they can remove me as CEO regardless of the marriage requirement. Can he get the votes? Maybe. He's been working them for months, planting doubts about my leadership, my vision for the company. The marriage just gave him more ammunition. She looked up at him. We need to be perfect, Caleb. No mistakes. No inconsistencies in our story. What story? We barely have one. Then we need to build one. She stood up, started clearing dishes. How we met, how long we've known each other, what made us decide to get married. It needs to be consistent, believable, something we can both remember under pressure. Caleb helped her clean up, his mind working through the logistics. We met through the co-op, like I said at the board meeting. You were visiting, doing site inspections, or whatever you corporate types call it. We talked, connected. When? 6 months ago. Long enough to be serious, short enough that people wouldn't question why they hadn't heard about it. Lena nodded, thinking. I was in western Nebraska in October doing supplier reviews. That works. We exchanged numbers, started talking, kept it quiet because of the business connection, didn't want people to think it was affecting professional decisions. And then what? I just proposed out of nowhere? No. We'd been talking about the future, about how hard it is to maintain a relationship long distance. When my grandfather's will came up, when I realized I might lose the company, you said we should just do it. Stop waiting. She leaned against the counter. It's romantic enough to be believable, practical enough to explain the speed. You've done this before, haven't you? Made up stories. I've managed corporate narratives. It's part of the job. She met his gaze. Does that bother you? I don't know yet. He dried the last dish, set it aside. What bothers me is how good you are at it. Makes me wonder what else you're lying about. I'm not lying to you, Caleb. I can't afford to. You're the only person in this entire mess who doesn't want something from me. I want $100,000 and my farm protected. That's different. That's transactional. That's honest. She moved past him, close enough that he caught the scent of her shampoo, something clean and simple, not the expensive perfume he'd expected. Everyone else wants power, or access, or to tear me down. You just want to survive. I can respect that. She headed for the stairs, then paused. We should practice tomorrow. The story, the timeline, how we talk about each other. Victor's going to put us in front of the board soon, and we need to be ready. All right? And Caleb, thank you for doing this, for not running when it got complicated. She disappeared upstairs before he could respond. He stood alone in the kitchen, wondering if he'd made a massive mistake or the best decision of his life, and realizing he had no idea which it was. The next morning started badly. Caleb woke to his phone ringing at 6. Marcus, sounding stressed. Hey man, sorry to call so early, but we got a problem. Your irrigation system's acting up again. Looks like the main line might have a leak. Caleb sat up, instantly awake. How bad? Bad enough that you should probably get someone out here today. It's losing pressure fast. I can't. I'm in Omaha. Omaha? What are you doing in Omaha? Too many questions he couldn't answer. Long story. Can you call Jimmy Sanderson? Ask him to take a look? I'll cover whatever it costs. Yeah, I can do that. Everything okay with you? Fine, just dealing with some things. I'll explain later. He hung up and found Lena standing in his doorway, already dressed for work, coffee in hand. Problem? She asked. Irrigation system. I need to get someone to fix it. How much? I don't know. Could be a few hundred, could be a few thousand, depending on what's wrong. She pulled out her phone, made a note. Send me the details. I'll have it handled. I can take care of my own property. I know you can. But right now you're here doing me a favor. Let me make sure your place doesn't fall apart while you're gone. She checked her watch. I have a meeting at 8. We'll practice the story tonight, okay? Just spend today getting familiar with the house, the neighborhood. If anyone asks, you're working from home. Working on what? Farm management, consulting, whatever sounds plausible. She started down the stairs, then called back. There's coffee made. I'll be back by 7. The house felt too quiet after she left. Caleb made himself breakfast, explored the space. Lena's grandfather had good taste, solid furniture, built-in bookshelves full of agricultural journals and business texts, photographs on the mantel showing a younger Lena with an older man who had the same sharp eyes. He found himself studying one photo in particular. Lena couldn't have been more than 12, standing next to her grandfather in front of a grain elevator, both of them dusty and smiling. She looked happy in a way he hadn't seen since meeting her. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Caleb Ward? A man's voice, smooth and professional. Who's asking? Robert Chen, private investigator. I'm conducting research for a client regarding your recent marriage to Lena Voss. I was hoping you might have a few minutes to discuss the circumstances surrounding... Caleb hung up. His hands were shaking. The phone rang again, different number. He didn't answer. It rang 4 more times before he finally turned it off completely. This was Victor's move, clear as day. Send investigators, pressure him while Lena was at work, try to catch him in a contradiction or get him to slip up. He needed to call her, warn her, but his phone was off, and he didn't know her number by memory. Stupid. They were supposed to be married, and he didn't even know her damn phone number. He found an old landline in the study, picked it up. No dial tone. Of course not. Who still had landlines? He was searching for a phone book, also probably useless, when he heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, he saw a man with a camera getting out of a sedan. Reporter or investigator didn't matter. Either way, bad news. Caleb moved away from the window, went to the kitchen. His truck was in the garage. He could leave, but that would just make him look guilty, like he was hiding something, which he was, technically, but they couldn't prove that if he didn't give them ammunition. The doorbell rang. He ignored it. It rang again, then knocking. Mr. Ward? I just have a few questions. It'll only take a minute. Caleb stayed silent, motionless. I know you're in there. Your truck's in the garage. Look, I'm just trying to do my job here. People are curious about this marriage. You can talk to me or I can write the story without your input, but it's going to run either way. More knocking, louder this time. Caleb's jaw tightened. He went to the door, unlocked it, pulled it open. The man was younger than he'd expected, maybe 30, with a messenger bag slung over his shoulder and a digital recorder already running in his hand. Mr. Ward, thanks for... No, Caleb said flatly. I'm sorry? No comment. No interview. No conversation. You're on private property. Leave. I understand you're protective of your privacy, but the public has a right to know... The public has a right to nothing about my personal life. You've got 5 seconds to get off this porch. The reporter's expression hardened. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you to leave. That's not a threat. It's a request. The threat comes if you're still here in 5 seconds. They stared at each other. The recorder kept running. Finally, the reporter stepped back. Fine, but you should know, this kind of hostility just makes you look like you're hiding something. Or it makes me look like a man who values his privacy. Interpretation's up to you. He closed the door, locked it, and stood there breathing hard. His phone, still off, was buzzing insistently in his pocket. He turned it back on without thinking. Text messages, lots of them. He scrolled through. Most were from Lena. Don't answer the door. Don't talk to anyone. I'm sending security. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Are you okay? The last one was from 2 minutes ago. He typed back quickly. I'm fine. Reporter was just here. I didn't say anything. Her response came immediately. Good. Stay inside. This is going to get worse before it gets better. She wasn't wrong. By afternoon, there were 3 cars parked on the street, all with people watching the house. Security showed up, 2 serious men in suits who positioned themselves outside and made it clear the property was off limits. Caleb felt like a prisoner in someone else's house, which wasn't far from the truth. Lena came home early, pushing past the reporters with a curt, no comment that sounded more threatening than Caleb's had. She found him in the study, staring at agricultural reports he wasn't actually reading. You okay? She asked. Peachy. Loved being under siege. She sat down across from him, looking exhausted. Victor's burning through his budget on this. He's hired 3 different firms to dig into our backgrounds. Find anything? Not yet. But they're looking at everything, financial records, phone logs, social media. They're interviewing anyone who might know either of us. She rubbed her temples. My assistant quit today, said the pressure was too much. I'm sorry. Not your fault. This is Victor being Victor. She looked at him. The board hearing is scheduled for next Friday. That gives us 8 days to be the most convincing married couple in Nebraska. No pressure. Actually, massive pressure. But I think we can do it. She pulled out her laptop, opened it. I've been working on our timeline. Want to go through it? They spent the next 3 hours building their fake history, where they'd had their first date, a diner in Ogallala, neutral territory, public enough to be believable. When he'd first told her he loved her, after a long conversation about her grandfather, his parents, the weight of carrying on a legacy. Why they decided to marry so quickly. Because when you know, and life's too short to wait. It sounded good. It sounded real. That was the problem. We should have some physical familiarity, Lena said, not looking at him. Not anything inappropriate. Just comfort with casual touch. Married couples don't flinch when they're near each other. Okay, like what? Hand on the shoulder, arm around the waist, small gestures. She stood up, moved closer to him. Try putting your hand on my back. He did, feeling awkward, his palm against her shoulder blade. She was tense, he could feel it. Relax, she said. You first. She let out a short laugh and some of the tension broke. Okay, this is weird. Very weird. But necessary. She turned to face him, and suddenly they were very close, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes. We need to look like we actually like each other, Caleb. That means not looking like I'm your parole officer every time we're in the same room. You kind of are, though. I'm really not. I'm just a woman trying to keep her company and asking for your help. That's all this is. Something in her voice made him believe her. Not the corporate polish, not the practiced confidence, just exhaustion and honesty. All right, he said quietly. Let's practice. They spent another hour working on it, standing close without awkwardness, casual touches that didn't feel forced, looking at each other without the constant guardedness that had defined their interactions. It was strange, artificial, but gradually it started to feel less wrong. Better, Lena said finally, stepping back. We might actually pull this off. Might. I'll take might over definitely screwed. She checked her phone, frowned. I need to make some calls. There's stuff in the fridge if you want dinner. I can cook. She looked surprised. Yeah? I'm not helpless. I've been feeding myself for years. I didn't mean... She caught herself. That would actually be great. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me. He made pasta, nothing fancy, with a sauce he threw together from whatever was in her pantry. She worked in the study, her voice carrying through the house in tense, clipped sentences. By the time he had food on the table, she sounded ready to throw her phone through a window. Everything okay? He asked when she finally emerged. Victor convinced 2 board members to flip. We're losing ground. She sat down, looked at the plate he'd set in front of her. This looks good. It's just pasta. It's someone giving a damn. That counts for something. They ate in silence, but it felt different than before. Less like strangers forced together, more like 2 people sharing the same foxhole, trying to survive the same war. Tell me about your grandfather, Caleb said eventually. Lena looked up, surprised. Why? Because if we're supposed to have fallen in love over conversations about family legacy, I should probably know something about yours beyond what's in corporate filings. She set down her fork, considered. He was tough. Came from nothing, built Voss Ag from a single grain elevator into what it is now. He believed in hard work, integrity, doing right by the people who depended on you. She smiled slightly. He would have liked you, actually. You remind me of him. How? You don't bullshit. You say what you mean. You do what you promise. She paused. Victor's nothing like him. My grandfather knew that. That's why he put the marriage requirement in the will. He was trying to make sure I had a partner, someone stable. He just didn't live long enough to realize I'd have to manufacture one. You think he'd be disappointed? In the method? Probably. In the outcome? She looked at him. I don't know yet. Depends on whether we win. After dinner, Caleb washed dishes while Lena returned phone calls. He could hear the strain in her voice, the way she was working to keep everything together through sheer force of will. Around 10, she appeared in the kitchen doorway again. I'm going to bed. Early meeting tomorrow. She hesitated. Thank you for dinner, for today, for not bailing when this turned into a circus. We had a deal. Deals get broken all the time. You didn't have to stay. Yeah, I did. I gave you my word. Something shifted in her expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Your word actually means something to you, doesn't it? Doesn't it to you? It should. My grandfather taught me that. But somewhere along the way, I forgot. She turned toward the stairs. Good night, Caleb. Night. He stayed up another hour, checking messages from Marcus about the irrigation repair, expensive but necessary, and trying not to think about how complicated this was all becoming. The next few days fell into a strange rhythm. Lena left early, came home late. Caleb managed farm business remotely, fielded increasingly aggressive calls from investigators, and tried to ignore the reporters who'd set up semi-permanent camp outside. They practiced their story every night, refining details, building consistency. And slowly, something changed. It started small, Lena actually laughing at something he said instead of just smiling politely. Caleb making coffee the way she liked it without being asked. Comfortable silences instead of awkward ones. Friday night, she came home particularly wrecked. Bad meeting, another board member wavering, Victor gaining ground. She dropped her bag by the door and just stood there, looking defeated. Want to talk about it? Caleb asked. Not really. Want a drink? Yeah, that sounds good. He found whiskey in her grandfather's study, poured 2 glasses. They sat on the back porch watching the sunset, not talking. I might lose, Lena said eventually. Victor's good at this, better than I gave him credit for. You're not losing yet. The hearing's in a week. If we can't convince them, we will. She looked at him. How can you be so sure? Because the alternative is unacceptable, so we don't accept it. He took a drink. My dad used to say that about the farm. Every year something tried to kill it. Drought, market crash, disease. Every year he'd say the same thing. Losing isn't an option, so we find another way. Did it work? For 40 years. Right up until the cancer. I'm sorry. Don't be. He lived the life he wanted. Died knowing he'd built something that mattered. Caleb studied his glass. That's what you're trying to do, right? Keep building what your grandfather started? Yeah, except he did it by actually being good at business. I'm doing it by faking a marriage and hoping no one notices. You're also doing it by working 16-hour days and fighting off corporate vultures. Don't sell yourself short. She'd laughed quietly. You're surprisingly good at pep talks for someone who barely talks at all. I talk when it matters. They sat in comfortable silence until the sun disappeared completely. Then Lena stood, stretched. I should sleep. Long day tomorrow. Lena? She turned back. We're going to win this, he said. I don't say things I don't mean. She held his gaze for a long moment. I'm starting to believe that. The weekend brought a brief reprieve. No reporters, no phone calls, just quiet. Caleb drove back to the farm Saturday morning, needing to see it, to touch dirt that was actually his. Marcus met him at the fence line. Irrigation's fixed. Cost about $2,000, but it should hold now. Thanks for handling it. No problem. Marcus hesitated. You going to tell me what's going on with you? Town's got all kinds of rumors flying around. Caleb leaned against the fence, looking out over his land. The wheat was coming in green and strong despite everything. I got married, he said finally. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. You what? Married. 3 weeks ago. To who? I didn't even know you were seeing anyone. Her name's Lena. She runs Vossag. The Vossag? The big agricultural conglomerate? That's the one. Marcus whistled low. Well, damn, Caleb. That's either the best decision you ever made or the worst. Can't tell which yet. Makes two of us. He spent the day working, fixing things that had broken, checking equipment, walking his land. It felt good to have dirt under his boots again, to do work that made sense. No corporate intrigue, no lies, just honest labor. But by evening, he found himself thinking about getting back to Omaha. About Lena, alone in that big house, probably still working. About whether she'd eaten anything all day. He texted her, "Want me to pick up food on the way back?" Her response came 20 minutes later. That would be great. Chinese? He stopped at a place she'd mentioned liking, got enough for 2+ leftovers, and drove back. She was still in her study when he arrived, laptop open, phone to her ear. But she smiled when she saw him, a real smile, and something in his chest tightened. This was getting complicated. This was supposed to be business, a transaction. But sitting across from her eating dumplings, listening to her talk about her week, watching her finally relax, it didn't feel like business anymore. It felt like something else. Something that might actually be real. And that scared him more than Victor, more than the hearing, more than any of it. Because this wasn't part of the deal. This wasn't something he'd signed up for. But it was happening anyway, whether he wanted it to or not. Monday morning hit like a freight train. Caleb woke to shouting outside, protesters, maybe a dozen of them, holding signs about corporate fraud and demanding transparency. Security was already trying to move them back from the property line, but the damage was done. The circus had found a new act. Lena was already dressed, standing at the window with her coffee, watching the scene unfold with an expression that could have frozen water. "Victor's getting creative," she said without turning around. "Those people actually care about corporate fraud? Or did he pay them to show up?" "Does it matter? They're here. The news crews will be here in an hour." She finally looked at him. "We need to go to work together today. Show a united front. Can you be ready in 20 minutes? I'm not exactly dressed for your office." "There's another suit in your closet. I had it sent over yesterday." Of course she had. Caleb wondered if there was any scenario she hadn't planned for, any contingency she hadn't already mapped out 3 moves ahead. 20 minutes later, they walked out together, Lena's hand tucked into the crook of his arm. The protesters surged forward, shouting questions, accusations. Security held them back, but barely. Camera flashes went off like strobe lights. "Mrs. Voss, is it true your marriage is a sham?" "Mr. Ward, how much did she pay you?" "Is Vossag engaging in corporate fraud?" Lena kept walking, her expression neutral but her grip on Caleb's arm tight enough to hurt. He matched her pace, kept his mouth shut, tried to look like a man defending his wife rather than a man way out of his depth. They made it to her car. She drove fast, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. "That was a taste of what the hearing's going to be like," she said. "Except it'll be worse because Victor will be orchestrating every question, every attack. I can handle it." "Can you? Because if you freeze up there, if you hesitate even for a second, they'll tear us apart." "I won't freeze." She glanced at him, something sharp in her eyes. "You say that now. Wait until you're sitting across from 12 board members who think you're a con artist, and Victor's lawyer is asking you to detail every conversation we've ever had, every moment we've supposedly shared." She turned back to the road. "This isn't your world, Caleb. These people eat guys like you for breakfast." "Guys like me?" "Honest guys, simple guys. People who think telling the truth matters." The words stung more than they should have. "And what are you, complicated and dishonest?" "I'm a survivor. I do what needs to be done." Her jaw tightened. "You think I like this? You think I enjoy manipulating narratives and playing games? I hate it. But it's the only way to win in my world." "Then maybe your world's broken." "Of course it's broken. But it's still the world, and I still have to live in it." They drove the rest of the way in silence. The Vossag building loomed ahead, all that glass and steel somehow looking more hostile than before. Lena pulled into her reserved spot, killed the engine, but didn't move to get out. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "That was unfair. You've done everything I've asked and more. I shouldn't take my stress out on you." "We're both stressed." "Yeah, but I'm the one who dragged you into this mess. The least I can do is not be terrible to you in the process." She finally looked at him. Victor called my lawyer this morning. He's subpoenaing our phone records, financial transactions, everything. He's building a timeline to prove we didn't know each other before October. Did we leave any holes? I don't think so, but he only needs one inconsistency, one piece of evidence that doesn't line up, and the whole thing falls apart. Caleb thought about that, about how many phone calls they'd actually had before the wedding. 0. How many times they'd been seen together in public before the courthouse. 0. How their entire relationship existed only in carefully constructed lies and a marriage certificate. We need something real, he said. What do you mean? I mean evidence that isn't manufactured. Something that shows we actually spent time together, actually built something. He rubbed his face, thinking. What if we went somewhere this week, made sure people saw us, remembered us, created a memory that can't be picked apart because it actually happened? Lena considered this. Like a trip? Like acting like an actual married couple for a few days. Go somewhere, be seen, leave a trail that investigators can follow and find exactly what they're looking for. 2 people who are actually together. That's not the worst idea. She pulled out her phone, started typing. There's an agricultural conference in Kansas City on Wednesday. I was planning to skip it, but if we both went, stayed at the hotel, attended together, that's a legitimate business reason to be traveling with hundreds of witnesses. Would Victor know we were there? Definitely. His spies are everywhere. She looked up from her phone. But that's the point, right? We're not hiding. We're just being a married couple doing married couple things. Exactly. She made 3 calls in quick succession, her assistant booking rooms, her lawyer preparing for any new attacks, her head of PR setting up photo opportunities at the conference. By the time they walked into her office, she'd transformed the trip into a full strategic offensive. The rest of Monday was meetings Caleb barely understood, sitting in corners while Lena fought battles on 6 different fronts. He watched her work, saw how she commanded rooms, how people either respected or feared her. She was good at this, he realized. Really good. Whatever else this marriage was, it had at least shown him that Lena Voss was someone worth fighting for, even if she'd never believed that about herself. Tuesday brought worse news. Victor had convinced another board member, putting the vote at 6-6. The hearing would be the tiebreaker, the final determination of who controlled Vossag's future. We're running out of time, Lena said that night, pacing the kitchen. The hearing's Friday. If we don't shift momentum before then— Kansas City, Caleb interrupted. We go tomorrow, spend 2 days being visible, being real. Come back Thursday with enough evidence to bury Victor's fraud theory. And if it's not enough, then we fight harder Friday. He stood up, moved closer to her. Lena, stop thinking about what happens if we lose. Start thinking about what happens when we win. You're very optimistic for someone with everything to lose. I already lost everything once when my parents died. Losing the farm would hurt, but it wouldn't kill me. You know what would? Giving up without trying everything possible. He put his hands on her shoulders, made her look at him. We're not done yet. Not even close. Something in her expression cracked, just slightly. How are you so calm about this? I'm not. I'm terrified. But I learned a long time ago that fear doesn't help crops grow or bills get paid. So you acknowledge it, and then you get back to work. She held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, Kansas City. We leave at 8. They flew out Wednesday morning on a commercial flight. Lena's idea, more witnesses. She held his hand in the airport, laughed at something he said loud enough for people to hear, played the part perfectly. Caleb tried to match her energy, but it felt strange, performative, until he realized she was leaning into him naturally, that her laugh was real, that maybe she wasn't entirely performing. The conference was exactly what he expected. Hundreds of people in business attire talking about yields and markets and distribution chains. Lena was in her element, networking, making connections, with Caleb at her side being introduced as her husband to everyone they met. This is Caleb, she'd say, and there was something in her voice that sounded almost proud. He runs a farm in western Nebraska, actually knows what he's talking about when it comes to wheat production. People were curious, friendly even. A few made comments about the sudden marriage, but Lena deflected smoothly, turning every question into a statement about how sometimes you just know, how waiting doesn't make sense when you found the right person. By dinner, Caleb's face hurt from smiling. They sat at a table with other executives, and he mostly listened, contributing when asked about farming practices, but otherwise staying quiet. Lena's hand found his under the table at one point, squeezed briefly. Support or performance? He couldn't tell anymore. Back in their room, one room, two beds, because married couples don't book separately, Lena collapsed onto her bed fully dressed. I hate these things, she said to the ceiling. 3 hours of talking about profit margins with people who've never actually gotten dirt under their nails. You were good at it, though. Years of practice. She turned her head to look at him. Thanks for backing me up in that conversation about sustainable farming. Victor's friend was trying to make me look like I don't understand the small producer perspective. You do, though. Understand it, I mean. I've seen your policies. You actually give a damn about people like me. My grandfather did. I'm just trying to keep his vision alive. She sat up, started removing her heels. You want to get out of here for a bit? Go somewhere that isn't full of corporate sharks? Where? I don't know. Anywhere. She looked at him with something that might have been hope. I need to remember why I'm fighting so hard for this company. Maybe you can remind me. They ended up at a dive bar 3 blocks from the hotel, completely wrong for how they were dressed, but perfectly right for what they needed. Lena ordered whiskey neat, Caleb got a beer, and they found a corner booth away from the noise. Tell me about your parents, Lena said after her second drink. Not the sanitized version, the real story. So he did. He told her about his father's stubbornness, how the man would rather die than admit defeat, about his mother's quiet strength, how she held everything together even when it was falling apart. About the morning he found his father collapsed in the barn, the 6 months of treatment that drained their savings and their hope, the day they finally had to accept it wasn't going to get better. He died at home, Caleb said quietly, in the bedroom where he'd slept his entire life. Mom was holding his hand. I was standing in the doorway trying to figure out how to keep going without him. And your mom? Lasted 6 months. Doctor said it was her heart, but I think she just didn't want to be here without him anymore. He finished his beer. They were married 43 years, real marriage, not whatever this is. Lena was quiet for a long time. My parents didn't have that. They were married because it made sense on paper, merging families, combining resources. They were civil to each other, maybe even fond. But love? I don't think so. She traced patterns in the condensation on her glass. That's why my grandfather put the marriage requirement in the will. He wanted me to have a partner, someone who actually cared. He just didn't realize I'd be so terrible at finding one that I'd have to fake it. You're not terrible at it. You just haven't had time. You've been too busy saving your company. Or maybe I'm just like my parents, good at transactions, bad at actual connection. She looked up at him. Do you think people like me can actually fall in love? Or are we too calculated, too strategic? I think people are more complicated than that. I think you can be both. Strategic when you need to be, real when it matters. He paused. You've been real with me, Lena. Maybe not at first, but lately, I see it. What do you see? Someone who's scared she's going to lose everything her grandfather built. Someone who works too hard and doesn't sleep enough. Someone who actually cares about doing the right thing, even when it's not the easy thing. He met her eyes. Someone worth knowing. Something shifted in her expression. Walls coming down, armor cracking. You're dangerous, you know that? How? You make me want things I shouldn't want, like honesty instead of strategy, like actual connection instead of performance. Would that be so bad? It would complicate everything. Everything's already complicated. She laughed, short and sharp. Fair point. She stood up, slightly unsteady. We should get back. Big day tomorrow. They walked back to the hotel in silence, but it felt different than the silences before. Charged, uncertain, balanced on the edge of something neither of them was ready to name. In the room, they went through the motions of getting ready for bed. Separate bathrooms, separate spaces, maintaining the boundaries they'd established. But when Caleb came out, Lena was standing by the window looking at the city lights, still fully dressed. I'm scared, she said without turning around. Of the hearing? Of this. Us. Whatever this is becoming. She finally looked at him. We were supposed to keep it simple, transactional, but it's not anymore, is it? Caleb knew he should lie, should tell her it was still just business. But he'd told her he didn't lie, and he meant it. No, he said quietly. It's not. That's a problem. Why? Because when this ends, And it will end, Caleb, one way or another. It's going to hurt. And I don't do hurt well. Maybe it doesn't have to end. Everything ends. Contracts expire. People leave. That's just how life works. Not always. He moved closer. My parents had 43 years. That's not nothing. Your parents actually loved each other. We're just two people pretending. Are we? Still pretending? The question hung between them. Lena opened her mouth, closed it, looked away. I don't know, she said finally. I don't know what's real anymore. Then maybe we figure it out together, after Friday, after all this is settled. And if we lose Friday, we won't. But if we do, then we still figure it out, he said firmly, because whatever this is, whatever we're becoming, it's worth more than a corporate hearing or Victor's games. She looked at him for a long moment, something vulnerable in her eyes that he'd never seen before. Then she crossed the space between them and kissed him. It wasn't gentle or romantic or any of the things kisses in movies were. It was desperate and uncertain and tasted like whiskey and fear. But it was real. The first completely real thing between them since this whole mess started. When she pulled back, she looked shaken. That was a mistake, she said. Was it? It has to be. We can't. This complicates everything. Or it simplifies it. He touched her face gently. What if we stopped worrying about strategy and just let ourselves feel what we're feeling? That's not how I work. That's not how any of this works. Maybe it should be. She stepped back, putting distance between them. We should sleep. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. She retreated to her bed, turned away from him. Conversation over. But Caleb could see the tension in her shoulders, hear the unsteady breathing that said she was just as affected as he was. He lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing everything had just changed and having no idea what happened next. Thursday was a blur of final conference sessions and knowing looks from people who'd seen them together. They played their parts perfectly. The devoted couple, the partnership that made sense. And the scary thing was, it didn't feel like playing anymore. On the flight home, Lena worked on her laptop while Caleb looked out the window. They didn't talk about the kiss, didn't acknowledge it at all. But there was a new awareness between them, a current that hadn't been there before. They landed at 6. The hearing was tomorrow at 2, less than 20 hours to prepare for the fight of their lives. At the house, Lena went straight to her study to review her presentation. Caleb made dinner, brought her a plate she barely touched. Around midnight, he found her still working, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted. You need to sleep, he said. I need to make sure we have every angle covered. Lena, we've been over this 100 times. We know the story. We have the evidence. You need to rest. I can't. If I stop moving, I'll start thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. He took the papers out of her hands, set them aside. Then think about the ways it could go right. We spent 2 days in Kansas City being seen by hundreds of people. We have hotel records, photographs, witnesses. Victor can question our timeline all he wants, but we just created evidence that can't be disputed. Unless someone saw through it, realized we're performing. We're not, though. Not entirely. He pulled her to her feet. Come on, you're going to bed. Caleb, no arguments. You're no good to anyone exhausted. Sleep for 6 hours, wake up ready to fight. That's the plan. She let him guide her upstairs, too tired to resist. At her bedroom door, she paused. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything, for not giving up on this, on me. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that. We're going to win. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He squeezed her hand. Get some sleep, Lena. Tomorrow, we show Victor exactly what he's up against. He went to his own room, but sleep didn't come easy. He kept replaying the last few weeks, how quickly everything had escalated, how much had changed, how a woman he'd met as a stranger had become someone he couldn't imagine not knowing. Somewhere around 3 a.m., he heard movement in the hallway. Lena's door opening, footsteps, then a soft knock on his door. Yeah, he called out. She opened the door, silhouetted in the hallway light. I can't sleep. Keep running through worst-case scenarios. Want company? Yeah, I think I do. She came in, sat on the edge of his bed. They didn't talk, didn't touch, just sat together in the darkness, two people facing down tomorrow's battle and finding comfort in not being alone. Eventually, exhaustion won. Lena dozed off, sitting up, her head dropping onto his shoulder. Caleb carefully adjusted so she could lie down properly, pulled a blanket over her. She murmured something in her sleep, reached for his hand. He held it, watching her sleep, and realized with absolute clarity that this had stopped being about the farm, or the money, or any of that weeks ago. He'd fallen for her. Completely, stupidly, impossibly. For a woman he'd married for practical reasons, who lived in a world he didn't understand, who would probably break his heart when this was all over. But watching her sleep, seeing the vulnerability she never showed when awake, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. Morning came too fast. Lena woke slowly, disoriented, then realized where she was. "I fell asleep here," she said, sitting up quickly. "You needed the rest." She looked at him, something complicated in her expression. "We should talk about after," he said firmly. "After the hearing. We deal with Victor first, then we figure out the rest." She nodded slowly. "Okay. After." They went through their morning routines like soldiers preparing for war. Lena in her sharpest suit, Caleb in the charcoal one that made him look like he belonged in her world. They reviewed their story one last time over coffee neither of them really drank. At 1:30, they drove to VOSAG headquarters. The parking lot was full. Board members, lawyers, probably half the corporate staff curious to see how this would play out. Media trucks lined the street. This was it, the moment everything either fell into place or fell apart completely. Lena parked, turned off the engine, but didn't move. "Last chance to run," she said, trying to make it sound like a joke. "Not running, we do this together." He took her hand. "You ready?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." They walked in together, hand in hand, facing whatever came next with something that felt a lot like courage, and maybe, just maybe, something deeper than either of them was ready to admit. The conference room was packed. The entire board sat along one side of the massive table. Victor was there too, looking confident, flanked by two lawyers who probably cost more than Caleb's entire farm. Other executives filled the remaining chairs, and someone was setting up recording equipment. This was really happening. Caleb and Lena took their seats across from the board. Her hand found his under the table again, gripped tight. He squeezed back, trying to transfer some of his certainty to her. The board chairman, an older man named Richardson, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address questions regarding the validity of Lena Voss's marriage to Caleb Ward, and whether this marriage satisfies the requirements set forth in Gerard Voss's will." He looked at them over his reading glasses. "Mr. Hale has raised concerns that this union may not be legitimate. We're here to examine those concerns." Victor leaned forwards, that predatory smile in place. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we can all agree that the timing here is suspicious. Lena was single for years, showed no interest in marriage, and then suddenly, weeks before the deadline in my uncle's will, she produces a husband. I'm simply asking that we verify this marriage is genuine and not a fraud designed to circumvent the will's intent." "That's a serious accusation," Richardson said. "It's a serious situation. VOSAG's leadership is at stake. We have a responsibility to ensure we're following both the letter and spirit of Gerard Voss's wishes." Richardson looked at Lena. "How do you respond?" She sat up straighter, her voice steady. "My marriage to Caleb is legally valid. We met, we connected, we married. The timing may seem sudden, but that doesn't make it any less real. My grandfather wanted me to have a partner. I found one. That should be the end of this discussion." "If it were that simple, we wouldn't be here," Victor said. "I've had investigators looking into your relationship, and frankly, the evidence doesn't support your story." He nodded to one of his lawyers who pulled out a thick folder. "Phone records show no calls between you before the wedding. Social media shows no interactions. Financial records show no joint purchases, no evidence of a relationship building over time." The lawyer looked up. "You claim you met in October. Can you prove it?" Lena pulled out her own folder. "I have the conference schedule from my October visit to western Nebraska. Hotel receipts showing I stayed in the region for 3 days. If you'd like to contact the co-op, I'm sure they can confirm my site visit." "Being in the same region isn't the same as meeting someone." "No, but it establishes opportunity. Caleb and I were both in the same place at the same time. We met during my inspection tour. We exchanged contact information. But not phone numbers, apparently. We corresponded through email initially. I preferred to keep it professional given the business relationship." Victor's lawyer smiled. "Then you'll be able to provide those emails." Silence. Caleb felt Lena's hand tighten on his. We used a private server, she said carefully, for discretion. How convenient. So there's no evidence of this supposed months-long relationship? No calls, no emails we can verify, no witnesses to confirm you were even dating? We kept it private. Or it didn't exist until you needed a husband. Victor leaned back, looking satisfied. I don't think you knew Caleb Ward before you married him. I think you found someone who needed money, made him an offer, and convinced him to commit fraud. And I think this board deserves better than being manipulated. Richardson looked troubled. Other board members were murmuring. This was going badly. Caleb could feel it. Then he remembered Kansas City, the hundreds of people who'd seen them, the evidence they'd created. We just spent 3 days in Kansas City, he said, speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at him. Agricultural conference. Lena introduced me as her husband to probably 200 people. We stayed at the Marriott, room 1847. Had dinner with at least 4 different groups of executives, all of whom can confirm we're together, we're married, and we're not faking it. Victor's expression flickered. Recent events don't prove a months-long relationship. No, but they prove we're actually married, actually together. Which was your whole question, wasn't it? Whether this is real? Caleb looked at the board. I know how this looks. I know the timing seems suspicious, but I also know that sometimes life doesn't follow a neat timeline. Sometimes you meet someone and things move fast because they feel right. Touching, Victor said, but it doesn't change the fact that you have no evidence of a relationship before the wedding. We have our word, Lena said quietly. Your word isn't evidence. One of the board members, a woman named Chen, spoke up. I was at the Kansas City conference. I had dinner with them Wednesday night. They seemed genuinely comfortable with each other. That's not something you can fake easily. Or they're both good actors, Victor countered. I'm not an actor, Caleb said flatly. I'm a farmer. I don't know how to perform. What you saw in Kansas City is what you get. 2 people who care about each other trying to build something real. Built on fraud. Built on mutual respect and shared values, which is more than a lot of marriages can say. The room went silent. Richardson looked between them, clearly conflicted. I think we need a recess, he said finally. The board will deliberate privately. We'll reconvene in 1 hour with our decision. Everyone filed out except Caleb and Lena. They sat alone in the massive conference room, the weight of uncertainty crushing. That was bad, Lena said. It wasn't great. Victor's winning. I can see it on their faces. We're not done yet. She turned to him, eyes bright with something that might have been tears. What if we lose? What if all of this was for nothing? Then we figure out what comes next, together. He took both her hands in his. But we're not losing, not yet. How can you be so sure? Because I refuse to believe doing the right thing ends badly. He pulled her closer. We did our best, Lena. Whatever happens now, we did our best. She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his shoulder. They stayed like that, 2 people holding each other against the uncertainty, until the board called them back. The hours stretched like pulled wire, tight and ready to snap. Caleb and Lena waited in a smaller conference room down the hall, neither speaking, both lost in their own versions of what came next. Through the walls, they could hear muffled voices from the board's deliberation room, raised at times, then quiet, then raised again. Victor's lawyers had set up camp in the lobby, looking confident. That worried Caleb more than anything. Lena was pacing, wearing a path in the carpet. She'd pulled her hair out of its tight bun, was running her hands through it repeatedly. The armor was cracking, showing the fear underneath. Sit down, Caleb said gently. You're going to wear yourself out. I can't sit. If I sit, I'll fall apart. Then fall apart. We're alone. Nobody's watching. She stopped pacing, looked at him. If I start, I won't stop. And I need to be strong when they call us back. Being scared doesn't make you weak. In my world, it does. She leaned against the window, staring out at the city below. My grandfather used to say that sharks smell blood in the water. The moment you show weakness, they circle. I learned that lesson young. I'm not a shark, Lena. I know. That's why this is so hard. She turned to face him. I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length. It's safer that way. Less messy. But you just walked right through all my defenses like they weren't even there. Maybe because they weren't meant to keep me out. Or maybe I'm just tired of holding them up. She moved closer, sitting down beside him. What happens if we lose today? If Victor gets control? We deal with it. He'll destroy everything my grandfather built, turn Vossag into exactly the kind of company we both hate, one that crushes small farmers, prioritizes profit over people. Everything I've fought to prevent. So we fight harder to make sure that doesn't happen. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really believe we can still win? I believe we have to try. Beyond that, I don't know. He took her hand, laced his fingers through hers. But I do know that whatever happens in there, it doesn't change what's happening here, between us. Caleb, I know we said after. I know we're supposed to wait until this is settled, but I need you to know something before we walk back in there. He turned to face her fully. This stopped being about the deal for me a while ago. I don't know exactly when, maybe that night in Kansas City, maybe before. But somewhere along the way, you stopped being the woman who showed up on my farm with a contract. You became someone I actually care about. Lena's eyes were bright, her voice barely above a whisper. That's a really terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. We're from completely different worlds. This could never actually work. Maybe not, but I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. She opened her mouth to respond, but the door swung open. Richardson stood there, his expression unreadable. We're ready, he said. The walk back to the boardroom felt like walking to an execution. Caleb kept his hand on the small of Lena's back, feeling the tension radiating through her. Victor was already seated, looking relaxed, almost pleased. That was a bad sign. They took their seats. Richardson remained standing, the rest of the board arranged behind him like a jury. Caleb counted expressions, 3 sympathetic, 4 neutral, 5 that looked like they'd already sided with Victor. The math wasn't good. We've reviewed the evidence presented and deliberated extensively, Richardson began. This is not a decision we take lightly. The integrity of Vossag and respect for Gerard Voss's wishes are both paramount concerns. Here it comes, Caleb thought, the careful language that preceded bad news. However, we've also considered the spirit of Gerard's will, not just the letter. He wanted his granddaughter to have a partner, someone to stand beside her as she led this company. Richardson paused. The question before us is whether Caleb Ward fulfills that role. He doesn't, Victor interjected. This marriage is a sham. You've made your position clear, Victor. Richardson's tone sharpened. The board has deliberated. We'll announce our decision now. Lena's hand found Caleb's under the table, gripped so hard it hurt. While we have concerns about the timeline and lack of documented evidence of a prior relationship, we also recognize that modern relationships don't always leave traditional paper trails. People communicate through methods that may not be easily verified. They keep relationships private for personal and professional reasons. Richardson looked directly at Lena and Caleb. More importantly, the evidence from Kansas City and testimony from board members who interacted with you there suggests a genuine partnership. That carries weight. Caleb felt a flicker of hope. Lena's grip loosened slightly. Therefore, the board has decided. Richardson was cut off by a commotion at the door. Someone pushing through, arguing with security. A young woman in a business suit, breathless, holding a folder. I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson, but this can't wait. It was someone from legal. Caleb remembered seeing her around the building. We just received this. It's urgent. Richardson frowned, took the folder, opened it. His expression changed immediately, shock, then anger. He looked up at Victor. Did you know about this? Victor's confidence faltered. Know about what? Richardson handed the folder to Chen, who read it and went pale. Oh my God. What is it? Lena asked. Chen looked at Victor with undisguised disgust. Sabotage. Documented sabotage of Caleb Ward's property. Irrigation system damage, equipment tampering, and she flipped a page, arson. The fire at your storage facility 3 weeks ago? It wasn't an accident. The room erupted. Everyone talking at once, Victor on his feet protesting, his lawyers scrambling. Caleb sat frozen, processing what he'd just heard. The fire that had nearly wiped him out, that had destroyed a season's worth of stored grain. That had been Victor? That's ridiculous, Victor was saying, but his voice had lost its certainty. I've never even been to Nebraska. Why would I? Because intimidation is your preferred method of operation, Richardson said coldly. According to this report, you hired contractors to make Mr. Ward's life difficult, hoping he'd back out of the marriage, or that the stress would cause fractures in the relationship. He held up another document. You also attempted to bribe 3 board members to vote in your favor. We have emails, Victor. Your own words. The color drained from Victor's face. Those emails are confidential. You had no right. A whistleblower came forward. Someone in your own office who was disturbed by your methods. Chen stood up. You didn't just question the marriage, Victor. You actively tried to destroy it. You put lives at risk with that fire. You broke multiple laws. This is a setup. Lena probably fabricated. I didn't know about any of this, Lena said quietly, but there was steel in her voice. But I'm not surprised. This is exactly who you are. Exactly why my grandfather didn't want you anywhere near this company. Victor pointed at her, his composure completely shattered. You don't deserve Vossag. You're weak, just like your grandfather was in his final years. This company needs strong leadership, not someone who marries a nobody farmer to satisfy a stupid requirement. That farmer has more integrity in his little finger than you have in your entire body, Lena shot back, standing now. My grandfather built this company on trust and fair dealing. You would have turned it into a criminal enterprise. Richardson held up his hand for silence. Victor Hale, effective immediately, you are removed from the board of Vossag. Your employment is terminated. Legal will be pursuing charges for the destruction of property, attempted bribery, and fraud. Security will escort you out. You can't do this. I'm family. You're a criminal. There's a difference. Richardson nodded to security. 2 large men approached Victor's seat. Victor looked around the room, finding no allies, no support. His lawyers were already distancing themselves, gathering their materials. He'd lost everything in the span of 5 minutes, and the reality was just beginning to sink in. This isn't over, he said, but it sounded hollow. Yes, it is, Lena said. You're done, Victor. You're done destroying people to get what you want. Security took his arms. Victor shrugged them off, straightened his jacket, tried to maintain some dignity as he was led out. But everyone could see the defeat in his shoulders, the way his world had just collapsed. The door closed behind him. Silence filled the room, heavy and disbelieving. Richardson sat down slowly, looking tired. Well, that was unexpected. The marriage, Chen prompted. We still need to address. The marriage stands, Richardson said firmly. Whatever questions we had about timing or legitimacy are irrelevant compared to what we just learned. Victor's accusations were part of an orchestrated campaign to undermine Lena's leadership and destroy her marriage. The board will not be party to that. He looked at Lena. Your position as CEO is confirmed. The requirements of your grandfather's will have been satisfied. Lena swayed slightly. Caleb put his arm around her, holding her steady. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me. Thank whoever in Victor's office had a conscience. Richardson closed his folder. This meeting is adjourned. Lena, I suggest you take the rest of the day. Process this. Monday we'll discuss next steps for the company. Board members filed out, some stopping to offer congratulations, others just looking stunned. Within minutes, the room was empty except for Caleb and Lena. She stood there, unmoving, staring at the space where Victor had been. We won, she said finally, like she didn't quite believe it. Yeah, we did. He tried to burn down your farm. He could have killed you. But he didn't, and now he's finished. Caleb turned her to face him. It's over, Lena. Actually, over. She nodded, then her face crumpled and she was crying, really crying, weeks of stress and fear pouring out all at once. Caleb held her, let her shake apart in his arms, kept her standing when she couldn't do it herself. I'm sorry, she gasped between sobs. I'm sorry he went after you. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. I'm sorry. Stop. None of this is your fault. He burned your storage facility because of me, because I married you. He burned it because he's a bastard who was willing to do anything to win. That's on him, not you. He pulled back enough to see her face. We survived, Lena. Both of us. We survived, and we won. She wiped at her eyes, trying to pull herself together. My makeup must be a disaster. You look fine. You're a terrible liar. Yeah, I am. He smiled. Come on, let's get out of here. They made it to the parking garage before the reporters could catch them, drove back to the house in silence. The protesters were gone, the media circus already moving on to the next story. The house felt empty, quiet, like it was holding its breath. Lena went straight to the kitchen, poured herself a drink with shaking hands. Caleb watched her down it. Pour another. Careful, he said. I earned this. But she set the glass down, didn't drink the second one. I keep expecting someone to call and tell me there was a mistake, that Victor found a loophole, that this isn't real. It's real. You heard Richardson. You're CEO. The company's yours. The company's mine, she repeated, testing the words. Then, quieter, and the marriage requirement is satisfied. There it was. The thing they'd been avoiding since the hearing ended. Yeah, Caleb said. It is. Lena turned to face him. So the contract is fulfilled. You did what you agreed to do. More than what you agreed to do, actually. You went above and beyond. I did. Which means you're free to go. Back to your farm, your life. I'll make sure the money's transferred, the mortgage handled like we agreed. You don't have to... Her voice caught. You don't have to stay if you don't want to. Caleb moved closer. Is that what you want? For me to leave? I want you to do whatever makes you happy. You've sacrificed enough for me. That's not what I asked. She looked at him, and he could see the war in her eyes, the part that wanted to protect herself, push him away, keep things safe and controlled, and the part that wanted to hold on, to see where this could go. I don't know how to do this, she said finally. Real relationships, ones that aren't contracts or arrangements. I don't know how to be with someone without an exit strategy. Neither do I. We'll figure it out together. What if we can't? What if we're too different, too broken? Then we'll be different and broken together. He took her hands. Lena, I'm not asking for guarantees or promises. I'm just asking if you want to try. If what we found in all this mess is worth seeing through. She was quiet for a long time, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. I'm scared. Me too. I could lose you. Could mess this up like I mess everything up. Or it could work. Could be the best decision either of us ever made. Your optimism is either inspiring or delusional. I can't decide which. He smiled. Probably both. She looked up at him, tears still on her cheeks, but something like hope in her eyes. If we do this, if we really try, we do it right. No more contracts, no more arrangements, just two people seeing where this goes. Deal. And you have to promise me something. What? If it's not working, if you're not happy, you tell me. You don't stay out of obligation or because you feel like you owe me. You stay because you want to. I can promise that. He pulled her closer. Can you promise me the same? Yes. Then I'm not going anywhere. She kissed him then, and it was different from Kansas City. Not desperate or uncertain, but deliberate. A choice being made, a door being opened. When they broke apart, she was smiling through her tears. This is crazy, she said. Yeah. We barely know each other. We know enough. My life is complicated. The company, the pressure, all of it. I know. And you still want to try? Lena, I drove 200 miles, married a complete stranger, moved into her house, and just survived corporate warfare with a psychopath. I think I can handle complicated. She laughed, actually laughed, the sound filling the kitchen. Okay, we try. That night they talked until 3 a.m, sitting on the couch with the city lights filtering through the windows. Not about strategy or corporate battles, but about real things, childhood memories and dreams they'd given up on, and what they wanted from a life that felt increasingly possible. I want to spend more time at the farm, Caleb said. Not give it up, not let it die. Actually work it again. Then do it. I can handle Omaha during the week, come out on weekends. That's a lot of driving. I don't mind. I'd like to see where you grew up. Actually know that part of your life. He told her about his plans to expand, maybe add cattle, try some different crops. She told him about changes she wanted to make at Vossag, policies that would help small farmers instead of crushing them, her grandfather's vision finally being realized. He would have liked you, she said again, would have appreciated someone who doesn't let me get away with my usual nonsense. What nonsense? The walls, the deflection, the refusing to actually feel things. She curled against his side. You don't let me do that. It's annoying. Good. They fell asleep there, tangled together on the couch, exhausted and relieved and cautiously hopeful. The next few weeks were strange, normal almost. Lena threw herself into restructuring Vossag, undoing Victor's influence, rebuilding trust with board members and employees. Caleb split his time between Omaha and the farm, hiring help for the day-to-day operations so he could be present when Lena needed him. They had dinner together most nights, started actually learning each other, how Lena liked her coffee, how Caleb couldn't stand mornings, the way they both worked through stress by staying busy. They argued sometimes, about stupid things mostly, learning how to fight fair and apologize when necessary. It wasn't perfect. Lena still worked too much, still struggled to let her guard down completely. Caleb still felt out of place at corporate functions, still didn't quite understand the world she navigated daily. But they were trying, and that mattered. 6 weeks after the hearing, Caleb was at the farm checking on the winter wheat when his phone rang. Lena, which wasn't unusual. "Hey," he answered. "What's up? Are you sitting down?" He stopped walking. "Why? What happened?" Victor was arrested. Federal charges, fraud, arson, conspiracy. They found enough evidence to prosecute. He's looking at serious prison time. Caleb let that sink in. Good. The fire investigator called me. Wanted to apologize for not catching it sooner. Apparently Victor hired professionals, covered his tracks well. She paused. "I'm sorry, Caleb. I'm sorry you lost so much because of my family's mess." "It's not your mess, it was his." He looked out over his land, thinking about what had been lost and what had been found. "And honestly, I'm not sorry anymore." "How can you not be sorry? He tried to destroy everything you had." "He tried, but he failed. And in the process, I found something I didn't know I was missing." "What's that?" "You." Silence on the other end, then her voice, thick with emotion. "You're going to make me cry at work." Wouldn't be the first time. That was one time, and there were extenuating circumstances. "Uh-huh. Where are you tonight?" "Late meeting. Probably won't be home until 9. "I'll make dinner." "You don't have to do that." "I know. I want to." He smiled. "See you at 9. "Caleb?" "Yeah?" "I love you." He stopped breathing. They hadn't said it yet, had been dancing around it for weeks, but never quite landing on the words. "Say that again," he said. "I love you. I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. I love you." "I love you too. Have for a while now." "I know, I could tell." She laughed softly. "You're terrible at hiding what you feel." "One of my many flaws." "I don't think it's a flaw." They said goodbye, but Caleb stood there for another 10 minutes, just holding his phone, grinning like an idiot, feeling lighter than he had in years. That night over dinner, they talked about the future. Not in vague terms anymore, but specific plans. Lena wanted to move the company's focus towards sustainable farming practices. Caleb wanted to turn his farm into a test site for new techniques. They could work together, combine their knowledge and resources. "We should probably make this official," Lena said, pushing food around her plate. "Make what official?" "The marriage. I mean, it's legal, but it started as a contract. Maybe we should—" She looked up at him, vulnerable in a way she rarely showed. "Maybe we should do it again, for the right reasons this time." Caleb set down his fork. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm saying we got married for all the wrong reasons, but we stayed married for the right ones. And maybe we should acknowledge that. Have a ceremony. Say the words when they actually mean something. You want a wedding. I want to marry you. Actually marry you, not just sign paperwork." She reached across the table, took his hand. "I want to stand in front of people we care about and promise I'm choosing you. Not because a will required it, not because Victor was threatening us, but because I want to spend my life with you." Caleb came around the table, pulled her to her feet, kissed her thoroughly. "Yes," he said when they broke apart. "Let's get married. Again. For real this time." She smiled, the full, genuine smile he'd fallen in love with. "Small ceremony. Just family and close friends." "At the farm?" "At the farm," she agreed, "where this whole crazy thing started. They set a date for the spring, when the wheat would be coming in green and the land would be alive with possibility. Lena invited the few board members she actually trusted, her assistant, A couple of friends from college she'd lost touch with but wanted to reconnect with. Caleb invited Marcus and his wife, a few other farmers from the area, people who'd known his parents and would understand what this meant. The weeks leading up to it were chaos. Lena managing a major corporate restructuring while trying to plan a wedding. Caleb preparing the farm to host people while managing planting season. They argued about details, compromised on almost everything, learned that marriage was less about grand gestures and more about showing up every day and choosing each other again. 2 days before the ceremony, Lena found Caleb in his father's workshop, going through old tools. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just thinking about my parents, wishing they could see this." She came to stand beside him. "Tell me about them. The real version, not the sanitized one." So he did. He told her about his father's stubbornness, how the man could hold a grudge for years over the smallest slight. About his mother's quiet manipulation, the way she managed his father through suggestion rather than direct confrontation. About their fights, their reconciliations, the way they'd built a life together that wasn't perfect, but was theirs. "They would have liked you," Caleb said. "Would have appreciated someone who doesn't take my nonsense." "What nonsense?" "The martyrdom. The idea that I have to do everything alone, carry every burden myself. You don't let me do that." "Good." She leaned against him. "I'm scared, about Saturday." "Why?" "Because once we do this, it's real, completely real. No contracts, no escape clauses, just commitment." "That's the point, isn't it?" "Yeah, but it's terrifying." She looked up at him. "What if I'm not good at this? At being a wife, a partner, all of it?" "Then you learn. We both learn." He kissed her forehead. "Lena, we've already been through the hard part. We survived corporate warfare, sabotage, nearly losing everything. I think we can handle marriage. The actual marriage might be harder than the fake one. Or easier. We already know each other's worst qualities and we're still here." She smiled. "That's a depressingly low bar. I prefer to think of it as realistic expectations." Saturday dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a promise. They'd set up chairs in front of the barn, simple decorations that didn't try too hard. About 40 people gathered, more than Caleb expected, fewer than a traditional wedding, but enough to feel significant. Lena wore a simple white dress, nothing elaborate, her hair down and natural. She looked more beautiful than Caleb had ever seen her, standing in his father's land with the sun catching her hair. The ceremony was short. No religious component, just a retired judge friend of her grandfather's saying words about partnership and commitment and choosing each other every day. When it came time for vows, they'd written their own. Lena went first, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Caleb, you appeared in my life when I needed you most, and you stayed when I gave you every reason to leave. You showed me that strength isn't about walls or armor. It's about being vulnerable enough to let someone in. You made me believe in partnership, in trust, in building something together that's stronger than anything we could build alone. I promise to choose you every day, to fight beside you, not against you, to love you not in spite of your flaws, but because of the whole person you are. This farm, this life, this future. I want to build it all with you." Caleb had worried about his vows, about finding the right words. But standing there looking at her, they came easy. "Lena, you walked onto my property with a contract and somehow ended up with my heart instead. You challenged me, pushed me, refused to let me hide behind my own walls. You showed me that love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone you're willing to fight for. I promise to be your partner in everything, to support your dreams while chasing our shared ones, to remind you that you're more than your company, more than your legacy. You're someone worth loving just for who you are. I choose you, today and every day after." They exchanged rings, new ones, not the temporary bands from the courthouse wedding. When the judge pronounced them married, they kissed like they'd never kissed before, like they were sealing not just a contract but a lifetime. The reception was casual, food and drinks and people mixing easily. Marcus pulled Caleb aside at one point. "Never thought I'd see the day," Marcus said, grinning. "You married to a CEO. Your dad would have found that hilarious." He would have loved her, though, once he got past the initial shock. "Think you made the right choice?" Caleb looked across the yard to where Lena was laughing at something Chen had said, completely at ease in a way he'd never seen at corporate functions. "Yeah," he said, "I really do." As the sun set, they stood together watching their guests. This odd collection of farmers and executives, rural and urban, somehow all fitting together on this piece of land that had seen so much history. Happy? Caleb asked. Terrified, excited, hopeful, all of it. Lena leaned into him. But yes, happy. Good, me too. They stayed until the last guest left, then walked through the quiet farm together, hand in hand, talking about plans for the future, expanding the operation, maybe building a new house, starting traditions of their own on this land. Think we can actually make this work? Lena asked. The commute, the different worlds, all of it? We already are making it work. He stopped walking, turned to face her in the twilight. We survived the worst of it, Lena. Everything else is just details. You're right, as usual. She kissed him softly. I love you, Caleb Ward. I love you too. Mrs. Ward. She laughed. Mrs. Voss Ward. I'm keeping my name professionally. Fair enough. Mrs. Voss Ward. They went inside as full dark settled, into the house that was slowly becoming theirs rather than just his. Tomorrow, Lena would drive back to Omaha for board meetings and corporate responsibilities. Caleb would stay and manage the spring planting. But they'd carved out this life together, this partnership that started as survival and became something real. In the quiet of the evening, wrapped in each other, they didn't talk about the challenges ahead or the distance they'd have to navigate. They just existed in that moment, two people who'd found each other in the strangest way possible and decided to hold on. Outside, the wind moved through the wheat fields, carrying the promise of harvest. Inside, two people who'd married for necessity discovered they'd found something better. A partnership forged in fire, tested by crisis, and strengthened by the simple choice to keep choosing each other. The contract was fulfilled. The marriage was real. And somehow, impossibly, they'd turned the worst gamble of their lives into the best decision they'd ever made. The first real test came 3 months after the wedding. Lena had been working 70-hour weeks trying to roll out new supplier contracts that would actually benefit small farmers instead of crushing them. Caleb was deep into harvest season, managing equipment breakdowns and unpredictable weather with the kind of exhaustion that came from too many 18-hour days. They'd seen each other exactly twice in 3 weeks, both times for less than 12 hours before one of them had to leave again. On a Thursday night in late August, Caleb finally made it to Omaha. He found Lena still at her desk at 11 p.m., surrounded by contracts and spreadsheets, looking hollowed out. You need to sleep, he said from the doorway. She didn't look up. I need to finish this. The rollout happens Monday. If I don't have every detail locked down, the world won't end. My credibility might. She finally met his eyes, and he could see the strain there. I've got board members second-guessing every decision, competitors trying to poach our suppliers, and about 6 different crises that all need my attention simultaneously. I can't afford mistakes right now. You also can't afford to collapse from exhaustion. I'm fine. You're not. And we're not. He came into the room, closed the laptop despite her protest. When's the last time we actually talked? About anything other than schedules and logistics? I don't know, last week? Try 3 weeks ago. We're living parallel lives, Lena, barely intersecting. She leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. What do you want me to do? The company needs me. This rollout is critical. I can't just... I'm not asking you to quit your job. I'm asking you to remember you have a marriage too. That's not fair. You knew what you were signing up for. Did I? Because I thought I was signing up for a partnership. Someone to build a life with, not someone I see twice a month if I'm lucky. The words came out harsher than he intended. Lena flinched. Then her expression hardened into something defensive. I'm doing the best I can. If that's not good enough, I'll play it. Don't. Don't make this about whether you're good enough. That's not what this is. Caleb sat down across from her. I'm tired. You're tired. We're both running ourselves into the ground trying to prove something. But at some point, we need to ask what we're actually building here. Is it a marriage or just 2 people who happen to be legally connected? Silence stretched between them, tense and painful. Lena looked away first. I don't know how to do both, she said quietly. Be good at my job and good at this. My grandfather managed it, but I'm not him. I don't know how he balanced everything. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he sacrificed things too. He made it work for 40 years with my grandmother. Did he? Or did she just accept being second priority? Caleb softened his tone. I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm trying to figure out how we make this sustainable. Because right now, it's not. Lena was quiet for a long time, her fingers drumming on the desk. When she spoke, her voice was small. I'm scared that if I ease up, even a little, everything will fall apart. The company, my credibility, all of it. Victor almost destroyed us. I can't let that happen again. Victor's in federal prison. He can't touch you anymore. But someone else could. There's always someone waiting to take advantage of weakness. That's how this world works. Then maybe you need to change the world, or at least your corner of it. He reached across the desk, took her hand. What if instead of trying to do everything yourself, you trusted other people to help? You've got good people working for you. Let them carry some of the weight. And if they fail, then you deal with it together. That's what teams do. He squeezed her hand. You don't have to be invincible, Lena. You just have to be present. For the company, yeah, but also for us. She looked at their joined hands, and he could see her working through it, the calculations running behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Okay, you're right. I'll delegate more. Trim my hours. She met his gaze. But I need you to understand, this company matters to me. It's not just a job. It's my grandfather's legacy, my life's work. I can't just walk away from it. I'm not asking you to. I'm just asking you to make room for both, for all of it. Can you do the same? The farm keeps you just as busy. Yeah, it does, and I've been thinking about that too. Caleb leaned back. I hired 2 full-time workers last month. Good guys, experienced. They can handle the day-to-day operations. I don't have to be there every single day anymore. You love that farm. I do. But I love you more. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The farm's not going anywhere. But us? We need maintenance. We need time. And I'm willing to step back from some things to make sure we get that. Lena's eyes filled with tears. How are you so much better at this than I am? I'm not. I'm just used to triage. Bad harvest. You figure out what's essential and what can wait. Marriage is the same way. You prioritize what matters most. She came around the desk, sat in his lap, buried her face in his neck. He held her while she cried, quiet tears, the kind that came from exhaustion and relief, and the simple act of letting someone else carry some of the burden. I'm sorry, she said eventually, for making you feel like you weren't important. You are. You're the most important thing. Show me then, not with words, with time. Okay. Starting tomorrow, I'll block out weekends, no work calls, no emails, just us. And I'll come to Omaha more during the week, actually have dinner together, sleep in the same bed more than twice a month. Deal. She kissed him, soft and slow. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never going to happen. You're stuck with me. They went home together that night, and for the first time in weeks, they actually talked. Not about work or logistics, but about random things, movies they wanted to see, places they wanted to visit, dreams they'd put on hold while trying to survive. It felt like rediscovering each other after a long absence. The next few months were better. Not perfect. They still argued about time management, still struggled to balance 2 demanding careers. But they were trying, actively working at it instead of letting the marriage run on autopilot. Lena started leaving the office at reasonable hours, delegating projects to managers she'd been afraid to trust before. The company didn't collapse. In fact, it thrived, the new supplier contracts bringing in both profit and goodwill. Turns out that treating people fairly was good business. Caleb spent more time in Omaha, learning to navigate Lena's world without losing himself in it. He started consulting on Vossag's sustainable farming initiatives, bringing practical knowledge to corporate strategy sessions. The executives were skeptical at first, but they learned to respect his perspective. By winter, they'd found a rhythm that actually worked. Weekends at the farm, weekdays split between Omaha and Nebraska, phone calls every night no matter how tired they were. It wasn't conventional, but it was theirs. Then came the call that changed everything. Caleb was in the barn checking equipment when his phone rang. Unknown number, which he usually ignored, but something made him answer. Is this Caleb Ward? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yeah, who's this? My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm an estate attorney in Lincoln. I'm calling about your mother's sister, Patricia Ward. Caleb's hand tightened on the phone. I didn't know my mother had a sister. She did. Patricia passed away last month. You're named in her will. His mother had never mentioned a sister, never mentioned any family beyond his father. Caleb had assumed there wasn't any, that both his parents had been only children. What did she leave me? He asked carefully. A property, about 200 acres adjoining your current farm. She purchased it 30 years ago but never developed it. According to the will, she wanted it to go to family. Sarah paused. There's also a letter. She requested it be delivered to you in person. Would you be available to meet next week? Caleb agreed to a meeting, hung up, and just stood there trying to process. His mother had a sister who'd owned land right next to his farm for 3 decades and never made contact. Why? He called Lena immediately. That's strange, she said after he explained. Your mom never mentioned her? Never, not once. I didn't even know she existed. Maybe they were estranged. Family falling outs happen. For 30 years? While living 5 miles apart? Caleb shook his head, even though she couldn't see it. Something's not right here. Do you want me to come with you to the meeting? Yeah, I think I do. The following Tuesday, they met Sarah Mitchell in her Lincoln office. She was maybe 60, with kind eyes and the gentle manner of someone who delivered difficult news regularly. Thank you for coming, she said, handing Caleb a thick envelope. Patricia was very specific about her wishes. The property transfers to you immediately, no conditions. But she wanted you to read this first. Caleb opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a handwritten letter, the paper yellowed with age. Dear Caleb, we've never met, and for that, I'm sorry. Your mother and I were close once, before pride and stubbornness got in the way. We had a falling out when you were just a baby, something stupid, something that shouldn't have mattered, but did. She thought I disapproved of her marrying your father, moving to that farm. I thought she was throwing her life away. We were both wrong, and too stubborn to admit it. By the time I realized how much I'd lost, how much time had passed, it felt too late to reach out, so I stayed silent. I bought the land next to yours thinking someday I'd work up the courage to knock on your door. I never did. Then your mother died, and I missed my chance completely. I'm writing this at 73, knowing I don't have much time left. Lung cancer, same thing that took our father. I'm leaving you this land because it should have been part of your family all along, because your mother would have wanted her son to have it, because I'm hoping you're better at forgiveness than I was at courage. I watched you from a distance all these years, saw you grow up, take over the farm, survive losing both your parents. You're stronger than I ever was. Make something good with this land. Don't let pride or fear keep you from the people who matter. I'm sorry I never introduced myself. I'm sorry your mother and I wasted 30 years on stubbornness. Don't make the same mistakes we did. Your aunt, Patricia. Caleb read it twice, his throat tight. Lena's hand found his under the table, squeezed. Are you okay? Sarah asked gently. Yeah, just processing. He looked up. She really watched me? All those years? She came to your high school graduation, both your parents' funerals. Always from a distance, always alone. Sarah pulled out a folder. She kept newspaper clippings about you, photographs she'd taken from far away. She cared, Mr. Ward. She just didn't know how to bridge the gap. Caleb looked through the folder, grainy photos of him working the farm, a clipping about his 4-H award in 10th grade, the obituaries for both his parents with notes in the margins. His aunt had been there, watching, caring from the shadows. She died alone? He asked. She had friends, a community, but no family? No. She regretted that deeply. They left the office an hour later with paperwork for the land transfer and a box of his aunt's belongings. Caleb was quiet on the drive back, staring out the window. You okay? Lena asked eventually. I keep thinking about what she said, about pride and stubbornness wasting 30 years. He looked at her. It could have been us. If we'd let our differences, our worlds, keep us apart. But we didn't. Only barely. There were so many points where this could have gone wrong, where we could have walked away. But we chose to stay. That's what matters. She reached over, took his hand. Your aunt didn't have that courage, but you do. We both do. They drove out to the new property the next day. It was beautiful, rolling hills, a creek running through the western edge, soil that looked rich and untouched. Patricia had kept it wild, never farming it, never developing it, just holding it, waiting. "What are you going to do with it?" Lena asked. Caleb walked the land, thinking. Something that matters, something that helps people. Over the next few months, an idea took shape. They'd turn Patricia's land into a training farm, a place where young farmers could learn sustainable techniques, get hands-on experience, build skills without the crushing debt of buying their own property. Vosag would sponsor it, cover operating costs. Caleb would manage it, teach the classes, share what his father had taught him. "You're sure about this?" Lena asked when he explained the plan. "It's a lot of work, a lot of time. I'm sure. My aunt spent 30 years regretting what she didn't do. I'm not making that mistake. This matters. It's worth doing." They broke ground in the spring. The first class of students, 8 young people from farming families who couldn't afford land of their own, started in June. Caleb taught them about soil management, crop rotation, equipment maintenance. Lena came out on weekends, ran workshops on business planning and market strategy. It was exhausting and rewarding and sometimes frustrating when students made preventable mistakes. But watching them learn, seeing their confidence grow, made every hard day worth it. One Saturday evening, after the students had left for the weekend, Caleb and Lena walked the property together. "Your aunt would be proud," Lena said. "You took her regret and turned it into something beautiful." "We did, both of us." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "I've been thinking about something. Dangerous." He smiled. "We've been married almost a year and a half. We've survived corporate warfare, family secrets, learning to actually be married instead of just legally connected. We're making it work." "We are." "So maybe it's time we talked about what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean the future. Beyond the farm and the company. What we want to build together." He took her hands. "Do you want kids?" Lena's eyes widened. "That's a big question." "Yeah, but we're not getting younger. And if we're going to do this, we should probably decide sooner rather than later." She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I never thought I'd have kids. My life was always about the company. But now, with you, with this," she gestured at the training farm, "I can see it. A different kind of legacy." "So that's a yes?" "That's a maybe leaning toward yes. What about you?" "I want kids. Want to pass down what my parents taught me, give them the childhood I had. But I also want to make sure we're ready, that we can actually handle it. We can barely handle our current schedule. Then we fix the schedule. We've proven we can adapt, make changes when we need to." He pulled her closer. "I'm not saying we do this tomorrow. I'm just saying let's start thinking about it, planning for it." "Okay, let's think about it." She kissed him softly. "But first, let's make sure we can keep this going. The marriage, the balance, all of it. Make sure we're solid before we add more complications." "Fair enough." They spent that summer strengthening their foundation. Lena promoted one of her vice presidents to COO, giving herself breathing room to actually have a life outside work. Caleb hired an assistant manager for the training farm, someone who could handle day-to-day operations when he needed to be in Omaha. They took a vacation, their first real one, to the coast. 5 days of nothing but each other. No phones, no responsibilities. They remembered why they'd fallen in love in the first place, rediscovered the partnership that had gotten lost in the chaos of managing 2 careers and a complicated life. On their last night, sitting on the beach watching the sunset, Lena brought it up again. "I think I'm ready," she said. "For what?" "Kids. The future, all of it." She turned to look at him. "I'm terrified, but I'm ready." Caleb felt his heart expand. "Yeah? Yeah. You were right. We've proven we can adapt, we can handle hard things. Why not this?" "Why not this?" he agreed. 3 months later, Lena took a pregnancy test. It came back positive. They sat together on the bathroom floor, staring at the little plastic stick with its 2 pink lines, both too overwhelmed to speak. "Holy shit," Lena said finally. "Yeah, we're going to be parents." "We are." She started laughing, then crying, then laughing again. Caleb held her, feeling his own tears on his face, both of them complete messes and completely happy. The pregnancy was rough. Lena had terrible morning sickness for the first 3 months, then spent the second trimester exhausted and emotional. The board meetings became a challenge. She had to leave twice to throw up, and there was speculation about whether she could handle the stress. "Ignore them," Caleb said when she came home frustrated. "You're growing a human. That's more impressive than any business strategy." "Tell that to the board." "I will if you want me to." She smiled despite herself. "My fierce defender. Always." The third trimester brought new challenges. Lena's doctor ordered bed rest at 7 months after her blood pressure spiked. She fought it, tried to keep working, until Caleb physically unplugged her laptop and hid it. "You're going to rest," he said firmly. "The company will survive without you for a few months. But the supplier contracts can be handled by your very capable team. Lena, our baby's health is more important than any contract. You know that." She knew, but letting go was hard. Admitting she couldn't do everything was hard. She spent the first week of bed rest miserable and anxious, calling the office every hour until Caleb threatened to hide her phone too. Gradually, she learned to let go, to trust that the company she'd built was strong enough to function without her constant oversight, to accept that being a mother meant prioritizing differently. Caleb worked from home those last 2 months, managing the farm and training program remotely, never leaving her side for more than a few hours. They used the time to prepare, setting up the nursery in the Omaha house, making plans for how they'd manage once the baby came, talking through fears and hopes and dreams. "What if I'm terrible at this?" Lena asked one night, her hands on her swollen belly. "My own mother was so distant. What if I don't know how to be warm, to be nurturing?" "Then you learn. Same way you learned everything else." Caleb put his hand over hers. "And you won't be doing it alone. We're a team, remember? Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll do better than our parents did. That we'll make time for each other, for our family. That we won't let work consume everything. I promise. On everything I have, I promise." Their daughter was born on a cold February morning, 3 weeks early, and screaming like she was furious about the whole situation. Emma Patricia Ward, named for Lena's grandmother and Caleb's aunt, both women who'd understood the cost of lost time. Holding her for the first time, feeling that tiny weight in his arms, Caleb understood what his father had tried to tell him years ago, that some things mattered more than land or money or legacy, that the people you loved, the family you built, that was the real inheritance. Lena recovered slowly, struggling with the exhaustion and the strange new reality of being responsible for a tiny human. The company kept calling, wanting decisions, needing her input. She tried to balance both, tried to be everything to everyone, and crashed hard after 3 weeks. Caleb found her crying in the nursery at 2 a.m., Emma asleep in her arms. "I can't do this," Lena said. "I can't be a good mother and a good CEO. I'm failing at both." "You're not failing. You're adjusting. There's a difference. The board is already questioning my commitment. They think I should be back at work." "Then they're idiots. You just had a baby. You're allowed to take time." "But the company," "will be fine. Lena, you spent years building Vossag into something strong and stable. It can survive a few months without you." He sat down beside her. "What do you want? Not what the board wants, not what you think you should do. What do you actually want?" She looked down at Emma, at their daughter's tiny, perfect face. "I want to be here. For this. For her. I spent so many years chasing my grandfather's approval, trying to prove I was worthy of his legacy. But maybe the real legacy isn't the company. Maybe it's this. So take the time. Be here. The company will still be there when you're ready." Lena took 3 months of maternity leave, the first real break she'd taken in her entire career. She learned to breastfeed, to function on minimal sleep, to find joy in small moments. Emma's first smile, her tiny fingers gripping Caleb's thumb, the weight of her sleeping on Lena's chest. Caleb took paternity leave too, stepping back from the farm and training program to focus on his new family. They stumbled through it together, the late nights, the constant worry, the overwhelming love that came with parenthood. It was harder than corporate battles or harvest seasons, but it was also better. When Lena finally went back to work, it was on her terms. Part-time at first, working from home when possible, making it clear that her family came first. Some board members grumbled. Richardson surprisingly supported her. "Your grandfather would be proud," he told her in a private meeting. "Not of the company, though that's going well, but of you, for figuring out what actually matters." The next few years were a blur of controlled chaos. Emma learned to walk, to talk, to express opinions with the same force of will her mother had. A second daughter, Claire, arrived 2 years later, quieter than her sister but just as determined. The farm prospered. The training program expanded to 2 classes a year, training dozens of young farmers. Vossag, under Lena's leadership, became an industry model for ethical practices, proving that doing right by suppliers could be profitable. But the real success was quieter. It was in family dinners where they actually sat together, no phones allowed. In weekends at the farm where the girls learned to feed chickens and collect eggs. In Lena learning to turn off the CEO and just be mom. In Caleb discovering that his legacy wasn't just the land but the family he was raising on it. On their 5th wedding anniversary, the real one, not the courthouse version, they stood in the same spot where they'd married, watching Emma and Claire chase fireflies across the field. "You ever regret it?" Lena asked. "Answering the door that day, saying yes to a crazy woman with a contract?" Caleb thought about it seriously, about all the chaos that decision had brought, all the challenges and complications. Then he looked at his daughters, at the woman beside him who'd somehow become his whole world. "Not even a little bit," he said. "Best worst decision I ever made." She laughed. "That's a terrible tagline for a marriage, but accurate. This whole thing was insane. Marrying a stranger, fake relationship turning real, corporate warfare, all of it should have been a disaster. But it wasn't. No. It was exactly what we both needed." He pulled her close. "You taught me that protecting the past isn't the same as building a future, that taking risks can pay off in ways you never expected. And you taught me that strength isn't about walls and armor. It's about letting people in, about being vulnerable enough to admit you need help." She rested her head on his shoulder. "We were both so broken when we met. Still pretty broken now. Yeah, but broken together, that's different." They watched their daughters play, these children who existed because 2 strangers had gambled on each other and won. Emma caught a firefly, showed it to Claire with the kind of gentle care that said she'd learned something about protecting fragile things. "Think they'll understand someday?" Lena asked. "When we tell them how we met?" "Probably think we're crazy." "We were crazy. We are crazy. Good crazy, though. The best kind." The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The wheat was coming in strong this year. The training farm's 2nd class graduating next month with job offers from companies that valued their skills. Vossag's stock was up, but more importantly, their supplier satisfaction ratings were the highest in the industry. But the numbers didn't matter as much anymore. What mattered was this: standing on land that had been in Caleb's family for generations, with a woman he'd married for all the wrong reasons and stayed with for all the right ones, watching children who represented a future neither of them had dared imagine. "We should go in soon," Lena said. "Get them bathed and in bed." 5 more minutes. "You always say 5 more minutes. And you always let me have them." She smiled. "Yeah, I do." They stayed until the fireflies disappeared and the girls got tired enough to stop protesting bedtime. Walking back to the house together, each carrying a drowsy daughter, Caleb thought about his aunt's letter, about wasted time and missed chances and the courage it takes to bridge gaps. He thought about Victor, rotting in federal prison, who'd chosen power over people and lost everything, about Lena's parents, who'd had a marriage on paper but never in practice, about his own parents, who'd loved each other but carried that love quietly, without flash or drama. And he thought about what he and Lena had built, messy and complicated and nothing like what either of them had planned, but real, painfully, beautifully real. Later that night, after the girls were asleep and the house was quiet, Lena found him on the back porch. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, settling in beside him. "Everything. Nothing. How we got here." He put his arm around her. "You know what the crazy part is? If you hadn't been desperate, if Victor hadn't been threatening everything, if your grandfather's will hadn't forced your hand, none of this would exist. We never would have met. Butterfly effect. One decision changing everything. Do you think we were meant to find each other, or was it just random chance that worked out?" Lena considered this. "I don't know if I believe in fate, but I believe in choices. You could have said no when I showed up at your farm. I could have found someone else, taken the easier path. We both could have walked away a dozen times when things got hard. But we didn't. No. We chose each other. Over and over. That's not fate. That's better. She looked up at him. That's partnership. Caleb kissed her forehead, breathing in the moment. 5 years ago, he'd been alone on a failing farm, watching everything his parents built slowly die. Now he had this, a wife he loved, daughters who filled the house with noise and life, a future that stretched out bright and possible. It hadn't been easy. It would never be easy. Marriage took work, parenting took work, balancing 2 careers and a family took constant effort and compromise. But it was worth it. Every hard conversation, every sacrifice, every choice to stay when leaving would have been simpler. I love you, he said quietly. I love you too. Even when you track mud through my clean kitchen. That was one time. It was 3 times this week. Agree to disagree. She laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet farm. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The wind moved through the wheat, making patterns in the moonlight. And 2 people who'd started as strangers sat together in the darkness, comfortable in the silence, secure in what they'd built. The contract was long fulfilled. The marriage was real, and the life they'd created from desperation and necessity had become something neither of them would trade for anything. In the morning, Caleb would get up early and check the fields. Lena would have conference calls and contract reviews. Emma would demand pancakes for breakfast, and Claire would spill juice on something important. The chaos would resume, as it always did. But for now, in this quiet moment, everything was exactly as it should be. 2 people who'd married for survival had learned to live, and in learning to live together, they discovered something their contract could never have guaranteed. They'd found home. Not in a place or a building or a piece of land, but in each other. In the family they'd built, the partnership they'd forged, the choice to keep choosing each other when it would have been easier to walk away. That was the real legacy. Not Vossag or the farm or the training program, though those mattered. But this, 2 broken people who'd found a way to be whole together, who'd taken a desperate gamble and turned it into a lifetime. Years later, when Emma was old enough to understand, she'd ask how her parents met. And Caleb would tell her the truth, that sometimes the best things in life come from the worst situations. That courage isn't about never being afraid, it's about moving forward anyway. That love isn't something you find perfectly formed, it's something you build, piece by piece, choice by choice. And he'd tell her that her mother showed up on a failing farm with a contract and a deadline, and somehow, impossibly, they'd turned a business arrangement into the greatest blessing of his life. Emma would probably roll her eyes. Teenagers did that. But maybe someday when she faced her own impossible choice, she'd remember. She'd remember that taking risks can lead to reward, that people aren't always what they seem at first glance, that the strongest bonds are forged in fire, not handed to you perfect and finished. But that was future wisdom. Tonight, Caleb held his wife on the porch of his grandfather's farm, listening to the wind, feeling the weight of her against his side, and knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Not because it was easy, not because it made sense on paper, but because some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are terrible and the outcome uncertain. Love was like that. Marriage was like that. Family was like that. Worth the risk. Worth the work. Worth everything. And in the quiet darkness of a Nebraska night, surrounded by land that had seen generations of struggle and triumph, 2 people who'd started as strangers sat together as partners, as lovers, as family. The contract had brought them together, but choice kept them there. And that made all the difference.